Our independent Victorian museum is full of amazing treasures. Here you can explore stunning collections of local fossils, natural history, model ships, carved jet, toys, costumes, and local history. There are artifacts from the famous whaling family, the Scoresbys, and also the explorer Captain Cook. Visit Whitby Museum. What will you find?
During our period of closure, we have been trying hard to keep engaged with members of the public via our website and social media platforms. One of the most popular ways we have had of doing this has been our Object of the Week posts. The Hand of Glory, Teleosaur and Tempest Prognosticator were obvious candidates, but here are a few that may not readily spring to mind. Bess the Wooden Doll. You might be forgiven for walking straight past this strange-looking doll, thinking she was just a wooden torso of a long-gone plaything. But Bess the Wooden Doll is a doll with a history. Bess belonged to the family of Thomas Hill of Marine Parade, Whitby. Thomas started his working life as a jet carver, and when this industry declined, used his skills to become a stone and monumental mason. Part of an unfinished model of Whitby Abbey carved by Thomas can also be seen in the museum. Bess the Wooden Doll had been given to Thomas's eldest daughter Mary and was passed down to each of his daughters in turn until it came to youngest daughter Eva. Bess was made from solid wood and would have had jointed arms and legs, which were already missing when she came into the family. Now for the unusual part of the story. Thomas would wait until the girls got Bess all dressed up in baby clothes and then take her and throw her into the harbour, sending his dog in to rescue her, thus training the dog to rescue any children who had the misfortune to fall in. Whether the dog ever went on to save any children, we don't know. Eva passed Bess down to her own daughter, who eventually donated her to the museum. A doll with a story to tell.
Black wedding dress. In the Whitby Museum costume collection, we have a black wedding dress dated 1874, worn by Mrs. M. Gardner of Kingston upon Hull. She was in mourning for her father, who died a month before the wedding. The marriage couldn't be postponed due to the fact that the newly married couple were travelling to India. Her dress was recreated in black satin, is heavily beaded and would have been worn with a full-length black veil. Thanks to the Tommy Rowe Trust Fund, we have had the dress conserved by an expert in Leeds. A considerable amount of work was done to mend damage to the silk and to sew on missing beads. This work cost £1,200 and it now looks amazing. A special mannequin was made to fit the dress and to display it to its best advantage.
Kirkdale Cave Bones. In 1821, a discovery was made in Yorkshire that helped to change our views of prehistoric life. In July of that year, a local naturalist from Kirby Moorside called John Gibson noticed something strange about the rocks being quarried at nearby Kirkdale. Among the rocks being dug to make a roadway was a huge variety of animal bones and teeth. The quarrymen assumed they were from cattle, but Gibson thought differently. The bones were traced back to a narrow cave entrance some 40 metres above the road. This entrance led to a cave network that was littered with animal bones and teeth. News of the find reached William Buckland, a pioneer in the new science of geology. Buckland soon realised that the cave contained the broken bones of hippopotamus, rhinoceros, elephant, bison, giant deer and hyena, as well as many small mammals. What were these animals doing here in Yorkshire? And, crucially, how could these huge beasts have got into the narrow cave? It was a real puzzle. Some people thought that the bones had been carried in by floodwater, possibly from Noah's time. But Buckland came up with a different solution, and in the process revolutionised his science. He suggested that the cave had been a hyena's den. Over centuries, the hyenas had dragged the bones back to the cave, where they crushed them with their immensely powerful jaws to get at the marrow. He even demonstrated this by feeding bones to hyenas in a travelling circus. Look closely and you'll see that the bones have jagged edges where they've been shattered by the hyena's jaws. Before Buckland's work, scientists had studied the anatomy of prehistoric animals and became expert at recognising and reconstructing their body shapes. The crucial leap forward that Buckland made was to deduce their behaviour simply from the remains they had left. In solving the puzzle of the Kirkdale Cave, Buckland kick-started a new way of understanding the past and founded the science of paleontology, literally the study of ancient life. We now know that the bones date from around 100,000 years ago, when a warm period occurred between ice ages. These Kirkdale Cave bones were among the first items to be collected by the newly formed Whitby Literary and Philosophical Society.
This temporary exhibition celebrates William Scoresby Jr.'s book, An Account of the Arctic Regions, first published in 1820. Most of the items in the cases aren't usually on display. The contract with the publisher is reproduced together with the transcription. The original manuscript is in the case below it. Our understanding of the Arctic and of science has grown in the last 200 years, and the exhibition briefly notes some developments in science and in society. The exhibition is illustrated with William Scoresby's original maps and drawings, and with artwork from the co-curator Caroline Hack. William Scoresby grew up in Whitby, moving to Liverpool in 1819 when he was 29. His drawings of snowflakes have been popular ever since they were first published. Scoresby was the first to realise the role of plankton in the food chain. Recent work shows that plankton plays an important part in limiting global warming by taking carbon from the atmosphere. Unfortunately, warmer oceans absorb less carbon. Space on a whaling ship was limited. As supplies were used, their place in the hold was filled with casks of blubber. In the explorer's wing, you can see some of Scoresby's experimental magnets and compass needles. His electromagnetic apparatus is also on display. William Scoresby's priority was to catch whales for the ship's owners. When conditions made whaling impossible, he could concentrate on scientific observation of the Arctic world. These animal bones include an undeveloped female narwhal tusk. There's a slideshow in the corner of the exhibition gallery which includes Caroline's photos of Svalbard plants with photos of Scoresby's dried specimens. The map case features Caroline's contemporary photos besides Scoresby's mapping and his profile drawings of the same landmarks, focusing on Horn Sound, Kings Bay and the Three Crowns. Scoresby became a public figure and a scientist of international standing. In a parallel career, he spent over 20 years as a diligent Church of England vicar. His book remains an important source for contemporary scientists as well as for historians. It's also inspired some outstanding fiction. This is the first museum exhibition staged jointly with an artist in residence. The two curators have enjoyed sharing their knowledge and enthusiasm.
The Albert Powell Collection. Albert T. Powell, 1882 to 1981. After retiring from the civil service and living for some time in Brighouse, Albert Powell and his wife moved to Whitby, eventually buying a house in Stakesby Road. Although classed as an amateur artist in that he sold few of his pictures, he meticulously recorded the minutiae of his life and that of the people and town of Whitby in pictures and words. His work was mainly drawn in pencil and sepia pen, with the occasional wash of colour to rooftops and individual items. As well as his lively, more personal work, the museum collection includes hundreds of beautiful drawings and sketches detailing the vast changes to the character of Whitby during the 1950s and 60s through alterations to the streets and demolition of old houses and shops. He created a unique time capsule of Whitby and a wonderful eyewitness source for future generations of the history of the area. The majority of the museum's Albert Powell collection was donated by the late Marchioness of Normanby. Her gift is priceless in terms of the history of Whitby and its people.
Hair jewellery. In Les Miserables, the sacked factory worker Fantine's desperation leads her to sell her hair. The event is graphically shown in the film of the musical. Fantine is fictional, of course, but her story is far from unusual, as poor women across Europe sold their hair for a pittance, and not always willingly. The hair was used in wig making, and as wigs fell from fashion in the 19th century, it was instead plaited into jewellery. Walking past the jewellery cases at Whitby Museum, on first glance you would never realise that these pieces were made from human hair. It is only on closer inspection that their origins are revealed. The use of human hair in jewellery was already established, with locks of hair placed inside lockets or brooches, with clear compartments as keepsakes. Whitby Museum also has fine jet examples of these. But by the 1850s, jewellery made entirely of human hair, such as necklaces or bracelets, were being made to commemorate weddings or deaths. Hair was worked, boiled and dried, often around a mould, either by professionals or at home using the many kits or instruction manuals available, then sent to a jeweller to have the mounts fitted. In Whitby Museum there are examples of jewellery made from both horse and human hair, a stronger thread often used to strengthen the plaits.
The exhibits take you on a journey over the last 2,000 years of archaeology and history on Whitby's East Cliff headland. The focus is of course on St. Hilda and the foundations of monastic tradition at Whitby, which lasted 200 years. The iconic ruins of the mostly 13th century post-conquest Abbey Church fascinate locals and visitors alike, and here you can satisfy your curiosity and find out about the people and how they lived, worked and prayed for nearly 500 years. Then look for what happened after the monks left. As you wander around the exhibits, it is important to remember that all the objects are accidental losses or discards. Most of them were found in the 1920s when the then Ministry of Works decided to make the Abbey a better tourist attraction by clearing fallen masonry. However, many objects were also found by members of the public in the 19th century and donated to the museum. This video will give you a taster for what you can find out when you visit. It combines object-intensive exhibits with the feel of a cabinet of curiosity and modern environmental safeguards to fit into the character of Whitby Museum.
Whitby Theatre Fire, 1823. The most remarkable conflagration known here for many years. So wrote the Reverend George Young in his book A Picture of Whitby and Its Environs. Fire was not unknown in old towns, with the dangerous mix of wooden construction and naked flames, but the burning of Whitby's Theatre on Friday the 25th of July, 1823, was by all accounts a large one. The building, sometimes dignified with the title of Theatre Royal, stood on Brunswick Street, then called Skate Lane, at the end of Newton Street. From the painting, the building was tall, at least 4 stories, and this was a prominent position. The fire would have been seen all over the town and looks to have attracted a large crowd. Young tells us there were 4 fire engines in the town, 2 kept on Church Street and 2 on Bagdale. These were not like modern engines, but more like large hand pumps, and probably almost useless against such a major fire. This original painting, now in Whitby Museum, was owned by Dr. English and was painted by a young George Chambers. On the reverse of the painting is an inscription by the artist. Chambers tells us that the fire broke out between 3 and 4 in the morning. The inside was completely burnt out, including the equipment of the strolling company of Mr. Scott's pantomime players, then in residence. Mr. Scott was a sword swallower who used steel swords of 2.5 feet in length. George Chambers was a pupil of John Bird and went on to be an eminent marine painter. This is an important early work by this man, as he was only 20 when he painted the theatre fire, and sadly died in 1840, aged 37, after prolonged ill health.
The Whitby Drawbridge. The present swing bridge in Whitby was opened almost 112 years ago by Mrs. Gervase Beckett, wife of the local MP, and was electrically operated from the start. On that date, they could never have imagined one-way pedestrian crossing because of a global pandemic, or bridge closures due to traffic to allow passing Goths. Probably the first mention of a bridge crossing the Esk in the town comes in a will of 1327, which refers to shops near the bridge foot. Later sources refer to repairs or damage, so nothing much has changed there. The model in Whitby Museum shows the last of the old drawbridges which crossed the river. This one cost £3,000 and stood from 1766 until 1835, when the first swing bridge was built. The leaves were lifted by counterweights and chains which were always tangling in rigging. At 32 feet, the opening of the 1766 bridge was greater than its predecessor, which had been weakened in 1746 when pieces were removed to allow Benjamin Coates's new vessel to pass when it was realised at the launch that the ship was too large to go through. In 1830, it was from this bridge that the driver of a hearse, John Brown, was blown into the harbour, never to be seen again. The model was made by or for Francis Pickernell, who was employed as a surveyor of the harbour and who would build the swing bridge in 1835, having constructed the West Pier Lighthouse in 1831.
Our fossil collection has over 7,000 specimens, including the spectacular fossils on display. The fossils are all from the Jurassic rocks of the Whitby area. These great marine reptiles are from the early Jurassic period. This region was then under a deep sea, rich in marine life such as ammonites, belemnites and bivalves, as well as these ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs and crocodiles. Our teleosaur was found at Whitby in 1824 and is the finest example of this species ever discovered. Ammonite fossils are plentiful in local rocks and are used to divide the Jurassic period into time zones. This display shows how Whitby naturalists established the basis of this science. These plant fossils are from the Middle Jurassic period, showing a change from marine to land conditions. More than a dozen types of dinosaur left footprints on mud and sandbanks of a large coastal plain around Whitby at this time. Later in the Jurassic period, sea levels rose again and became warmer, leaving fossils of corals, sea urchins and gastropods. From reptiles to tree ferns and from dinosaurs to ammonites, the whole of Jurassic history is in our collection.